My name is Eleonora, but everyone calls me Nora. Until 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was on the perfect track. I had a fulfilling career at Westbrook Property Appraisals, a respected firm specializing in high-end real estate with offices across the Northeast. I lived in a stunning waterfront condominium in Boston with my fiancé of 3 years, Dominic. We met during my final semester at Wharton, and the chemistry was immediate and intense. After graduation, I landed my dream position as a luxury property appraiser, and Dominic moved in when I purchased my condo overlooking the harbor. I still feel the sharp sting of that night when everything shattered. It was supposed to be our engagement celebration dinner. My colleagues had organized an elegant event at Venezia, an upscale restaurant with a private dining room that offered breathtaking views of the Boston skyline. The evening was in full swing, champagne flowing freely, when I slipped away to prepare my thank you speech. As I rounded the corner toward the small antechamber, my heart froze in my chest. There was Dominic, my Dominic, with his arms wrapped around Clarissa, our firm's new junior appraiser, their lips locked in an intimate kiss that spoke of much more than a first encounter. My body went completely still, a strange calm washing over me as I discreetly pulled out my phone and snapped several photos. The rational part of my brain was already planning my next steps while my heart splintered into pieces. When the initial shock subsided, a white-hot rage surged through my veins. Really? The night before our engagement announcement? My voice cut through the room like ice, causing them to spring apart violently. Dominic's face drained of color when he saw me standing there. Nora, baby, this isn't what. If you're about to say this isn't what it looks like, save your breath, I interrupted, my voice trembling with barely controlled fury. Because it looks exactly like my fiancé betraying me at our own celebration dinner. Nora, please. Let's go back to the condo and talk about this privately, he begged, reaching for my hand. The condo? I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. You mean MY waterfront property that you haven't contributed a dime toward? The place where you've been living rent-free while I believed we had a future together? I expect your things gone by tomorrow evening. I turned away, my head high despite the burning in my eyes, and walked calmly through the restaurant. I could hear Dominic calling after me, his voice growing desperate. My colleague Samantha found me outside, her face etched with concern as she helped me into a rideshare. I was too numb to cry then. The tears would come later, alone in my beautiful condo surrounded by evidence of Dominic's presence and the painful reminder of my own blindness. For 2 weeks straight, I immersed myself in work, volunteering for complex property assessments and staying at the office until security did their final rounds. But returning to my half-empty condo each night made the hollow feeling in my chest expand. Not because I missed Dominic, my anger still burned too fiercely for that, but because I suddenly realized Boston held nothing for me beyond my career. My true home waited for me in Pinewood, a charming lakeside town in upstate New York. The house my father, a talented architect, had designed and built himself. The home he'd specifically left to me when cancer took him 8 years ago. I was 23 and midway through my master's program when it happened. Mom's tearful call came at 3:17 a.m., her voice breaking as she told me Dad had taken a sudden turn. By the time I completed the grueling 6-hour drive through a spring storm, he was already gone. Dad had been meticulous in his will, leaving the house, his masterpiece, directly to me. So you'll always have roots, he'd written in a letter I received after the funeral, the paper now worn from repeated readings. After burying my father, I returned to my studies, throwing myself into my coursework to escape the grief. Mom stayed in the house alone for almost a year before delivering unexpected news. She was remarrying a man named Maxwell, a local real estate broker with 2 children from his previous marriage. The announcement felt like a betrayal, coming so soon after Dad's passing. The thought of strangers living in the home Dad had crafted with such love made my chest tighten painfully. But Mom's eyes filled with tears as she described her loneliness, insisting that Maxwell provided the stability and companionship she desperately needed. Reluctantly, my heart aching, I agreed they could live there. What choice did I have? I couldn't bear to think of Mom rattling around alone in that spacious house, surrounded by memories. After completing my degree, I accepted the position in Boston rather than returning to Pinewood. The career opportunity was exceptional, but truthfully, I couldn't face living in a home that no longer felt like mine. During my infrequent holiday visits, I felt like an unwelcome guest. Mom seemed perpetually occupied with Maxwell or his children, Olivia and Ethan. They maintained a veneer of politeness, but the message was crystal clear: I wasn't a part of their carefully constructed family narrative. As I sat in my waterfront condo, surrounded by half-empty closets and the lingering scent of Dominic's cologne, I scrolled through my phone, deliberately ignoring his desperate texts. A fierce resolve crystallized inside me. It was time to return home. To my home. My firm had a prestigious office in Albany, barely a 30-minute drive from Pinewood. I could transfer there, reclaim my house, and rebuild my life on my own terms. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Harrison, my director. "Nora, what can I do for you?" Harrison asked warmly as I settled into the chair across from his imposing mahogany desk. "I need to request a transfer to the Albany office," I stated firmly, my decision unwavering. He leaned back, studying me with shrewd eyes before sighing deeply. "You're one of our top appraisers, Nora. Your high-end portfolio brings significant value to this office. Let me see what arrangements might be possible to keep you with the firm." 3 days later, Harrison confirmed my transfer. The move would come with a moderate salary adjustment, but I could easily absorb the difference. Property values in Pinewood were a fraction of Boston's inflated market. That evening, I called Mom to inform her of my plans. My heart pounded as I waited through 3 rings. "Mom, I have something important to tell you," I began when she answered. "I'm moving back to Pinewood. To my house." The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Oh. When exactly?" "In about 2 weeks. I wanted to give you some notice so my room could be prepared." Another pause, this one heavy with tension. "Your room?" "But Olivia's been using that space as her design studio since she started freelancing." My fingers tightened around the phone. "She'll need to relocate to one of the other bedrooms," I replied, keeping my voice deliberately even. "It is legally my house, Mom." "Yes, of course," she responded hastily. "It's just rather unexpected. But we'll certainly be pleased to have you home with us." Something in her strained tone told me the exact opposite, but I pushed aside the uneasiness creeping up my spine. "Great. I'll see you soon, then." As I ended the call, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that reclaiming my inheritance wouldn't be as straightforward as I'd hoped. But my determination burned bright. I would take back my home and my life, regardless of the resistance I might face. The preparations for my relocation passed in a whirlwind of activity. I terminated my lease, liquidated most of my furniture, and carefully packed the things that held meaning. My colleagues organized a farewell gathering at the Harbor View, pointedly different from the restaurant where Dominic's betrayal had unfolded. The drive to Pinewood stretched nearly 6 hours through rolling countryside. As I finally turned onto Maple Street, my breath caught at the sight of the distinctive craftsman-style home with its signature roofline. My house. Dad had designed every inch himself, collaborating with local artisans to create a home that perfectly balanced aesthetics and function. The cedar siding had been stained a deeper shade than I remembered, and the carefully planned native garden beds Dad had been so proud of now looked neglected and overgrown. Before I could retrieve even one bag, the front door swung open and Mom emerged onto the broad porch. She looked noticeably older than during my Christmas visit just months ago. New lines bracketed her mouth, and her once rich brown hair now contained prominent streaks of silver. "Nora," she called, moving toward me with arms extended. "Welcome home, sweetheart." I embraced her, the familiar scent of her vanilla perfume triggering a rush of complicated emotions. "Hi, Mom." Maxwell appeared in the doorway, observing our reunion with calculating eyes. He stood tall with thinning sandy hair and perpetually downturned lips. I'd never actively disliked him, but his presence had always made me uneasy. "Eleonora," he acknowledged with a curt nod as I approached. His gaze swept critically over my car filled with boxes and luggage. "Seems you've brought half of Boston with you." "Just the necessities," I replied with a forced smile that strained my cheeks. "Mostly professional materials and personal items." "Well," he grunted without offering assistance, "Olivia has relocated her equipment to the small guest room. Your former bedroom is available now." Mom shot him a look I couldn't quite decipher before turning back to me. "Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted after such a long drive." The interior of the house felt simultaneously familiar and jarringly foreign. The fundamental architecture remained unchanged, but the furniture arrangements were different, and many of Dad's carefully chosen decorative elements had vanished, replaced by generic pieces I didn't recognize. As we moved through the dining area with its handcrafted built-in cabinets, Olivia and Ethan descended from upstairs. Ethan, now 24 and lanky, gave me an awkward half-smile. "Hey," he mumbled. "Hi, Ethan. Community college treating you well?" Olivia, 27 and dressed in what appeared to be carefully curated bohemian attire, stood with arms tightly crossed. Her expression radiated unmistakable hostility. "So you're actually moving in permanently?" she asked sharply, not bothering to disguise her question as a welcome. "Olivia," Mom cautioned. "What?" "Everyone knows she's moving in." I spent the entire weekend cramming my design materials into that claustrophobic back room that doesn't even have proper lighting. I inhaled deeply, willing myself to remain composed. "It's lovely to see you too, Olivia." Dinner that evening crackled with unspoken tension. Maxwell dominated the conversation with details about his latest real estate listings, Ethan offered monosyllabic responses when directly addressed, and Olivia merely pushed food around her plate while shooting daggers at me with her eyes. "So," Maxwell said after draining his second glass of wine, "what's your time frame for staying with us?" I froze with my fork suspended halfway to my mouth, a surge of irritation flooding my chest. "I'm not staying. I've moved back permanently. This is my home now." Maxwell exchanged a meaningful glance with Mom. "Right, of course. It's just that we've established certain household systems over the years. I'm confident we can all adapt," I replied with deliberate calmness despite my racing pulse. "I'll be at the Albany office full-time during weekdays, so the house will be yours during business hours." "I had to surrender Dad's study because of you," Olivia suddenly erupted. "I've been using that space as my design studio for nearly 3 years, and now my equipment is jammed into that microscopic guest room with terrible natural light." I waited for Mom or Maxwell to intervene, to remind Olivia whose house we were actually sitting in, but they remained conspicuously silent, exchanging uncomfortable glances. "Actually," I said with measured precision, "this entire property legally belongs to me. Dad left it to me specifically in his will. Technically, I could claim any room in the house." "This is absolutely..." Olivia leapt to her feet so violently her chair crashed backward. "I had my entire professional setup arranged perfectly in that room. My drafting table, my computer station, my material samples, everything. And now I'm expected to function professionally in a glorified closet because the prodigal daughter finally decided to remember we exist?" She stormed from the room, slamming her door with such force the framed photographs on the wall trembled. Mom fixed me with an accusatory stare. Was that confrontation really necessary? I gaped at her, a knot of disbelief tightening in my stomach. I instigated that? She's been radiating hostility since the moment I arrived. Mom's expression hardened into something unfamiliar. "Let's not escalate this tonight. You're exhausted from the drive. Perhaps things will seem more manageable tomorrow." But the situation didn't improve the following day, or the day after. I immersed myself in my new position, quickly learning the protocols at the Albany office. Though smaller than our Boston headquarters, the fundamentals remained the same, and I rapidly established my reputation. I reconnected with several friends from high school still living in the area, including Audrey, my closest confidant from senior year, who now served as a pediatrician at Pinewood Memorial Hospital. 2 weeks after my return, I arrived home from an intensive day of property assessments to find Olivia transforming the living room with elaborate decorations, artfully arranged streamers, and designer balloon arrangements. "What's happening here?" I asked, setting down my portfolio case filled with client files. "My birthday celebration," she answered curtly without bothering to look up from her meticulous arrangement of fairy lights. "This Saturday evening." "That sounds nice. Should I pick up a gift?" I attempted civility, though shopping for my resentful stepsister ranked low on my list of priorities. Olivia released a derisive laugh. "Don't trouble yourself. You won't be in attendance." "I beg your pardon?" Mom emerged from the kitchen just then, nervously drying her hands on a dish towel. "Nora, dear, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" She guided me to the back porch where Dad and I used to count stars during summer evenings. Now the space was cluttered with Maxwell's landscaping equipment and stacks of promotional real estate materials. "Olivia has invited several important design clients for her birthday gathering this Saturday," Mom explained, anxiously twisting her wedding band. She was rather hoping to have exclusive use of the house for the evening. I stared at her, heat rising in my face. "Are you seriously asking me to vacate my own property for Olivia's party? Just for a few hours. Perhaps you could catch a film or have dinner with Audrey in town." "This is unbelievable, Mom. This is legally my house. I refuse to be expelled from my own home for a celebration I wasn't even invited to attend." "Please don't complicate matters further," Mom implored, her voice strained. "The atmosphere has been sufficiently charged since your return. And who created that environment? Everyone treats me like an unwelcome intruder when I'm the actual owner of this property." Mom's expression crumpled slightly. "I thought perhaps you might extend this courtesy as a favor to me." Her words stung like a physical blow. I rose to my feet, my chest tight with hurt. "I won't create any disturbances during Olivia's gathering. I'll remain in my room for the evening. But I absolutely will not leave." Mom's face registered clear disappointment as she nodded reluctantly. "I'll inform Olivia of your decision." At dinner that night, Olivia flaunted her indignation like a designer accessory. "I suppose I'll just have to relocate my entire event to Castellanos," she announced with theatrical flair, since certain people, she shot a pointed glare in my direction, refused to demonstrate basic courtesy. I bit my tongue until I tasted metal, kept my eyes fixed on my plate, and maintained my silence. Maxwell grumbled something about extravagant venue costs, while Ethan, true to form, appeared utterly disinterested in our family drama. When Saturday arrived, Olivia and her entourage of fellow designers and potential clients descended on Castellanos for her celebration. The house fell into a blessed silence, and I indulged in the luxury of lounging in comfortable pajamas, streaming classic films in the living room, savoring the feeling of solitude in my own space for the first time since my return. A sense of peaceful ownership washed over me as I stretched out on the couch my father had selected years ago. Life eventually settled into a tense rhythm over the subsequent months. I immersed myself in my career, returned home, and strategically minimized interactions with my housemates. The word family no longer seemed to apply to our strained arrangement. Most evenings I would consume my dinner rapidly before retreating to my bedroom sanctuary, or escape entirely to meet Audrey or other reconnected friends from my past. Professionally, my transition exceeded expectations. My supervisor in Albany valued the expertise I had developed in Boston's competitive market, and I was already being groomed for a senior appraiser position. The daily commute proved manageable, and I found unexpected comfort in the familiar landscapes of my hometown. During lunch breaks, I occasionally drove past landmarks from my earlier life, my former high school campus with its distinctive clock tower, or the tranquil lakeside park where Dad had taught me to cast a fishing line with perfect patience. One particularly humid evening in late August, I returned home to discover Mom and Maxwell seated at the dining table, an ominous stack of documents arranged before them. They glanced up as I entered, and something in their calculated expressions made my heart constrict. "Nora," Mom addressed me, her tone unnaturally formal, "we need to discuss something important with you." I lowered myself into a chair, anxiety pooling in my stomach. "Is everything all right? Has something occurred I should know about?" Mom slid several papers in my direction, utility statements, I realized as I scanned the letterheads. "We need to address the current financial arrangements of the household." "What specific aspects?" Maxwell cleared his throat with authority. "Since your return, our utility expenditures have increased substantially. Water consumption, electricity usage, heating costs, everything has risen significantly." "I already contribute to household expenses," I reminded her, maintaining my professional composure. "I transfer $300 to your account monthly, which exceeds my proportional share of groceries." Mom and Maxwell exchanged a loaded glance that sent warning signals through my body. "That merely covers food," Mom clarified. "It doesn't address the other mounting expenses." A chill crept along my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "We believe it would be equitable if you paid rent," Maxwell stated with the blunt force of a sledgehammer. $1,000 monthly seems reasonable." "You cannot be serious," I replied, my voice vibrating with disbelief. "This house legally belongs to me. Dad explicitly left it to me in his will. If anyone should be collecting rent, it would be me." Maxwell's expression hardened into granite. "Now you listen carefully, young lady. We've maintained this property for 8 years while you were building your fancy career in Boston. We've covered property taxes, replaced the entire roof, installed a new water heater." "I never requested any of those expenditures," I countered sharply. "And I offered financial assistance for major repairs multiple times, but Mom repeatedly assured me you had everything handled." I turned to Mom, silently pleading for her support, waiting for her to defend me. Instead, she averted her gaze, pressing her lips into a thin line. "Mom?" My voice wavered with vulnerability. "You can't possibly expect me to pay rent for a house that legally belongs to me. If you're unwilling to contribute financially to this household," Maxwell pronounced with glacial coldness, "perhaps you should consider alternative living arrangements." His words struck me with the force of a physical assault. I turned to Mom again, certain she would object to her husband effectively evicting her daughter from her own property. Instead, she offered a slight nod of agreement, siding with him completely. I exited the room swiftly, unwilling to let them witness the tears threatening to spill down my cheeks. In the privacy of my bedroom, I perched on the edge of my mattress, struggling to process the breathtaking audacity of what had just transpired. The house remained quiet, but my thoughts roared like a tempest. Sleep remained elusive throughout that endless night. By morning, my shock had crystallized into righteous fury. I prepared for work with mechanical precision, mentally fortifying myself for the inevitable confrontation. When I descended for breakfast, I found the entire household already assembled. Mom nervously stirring her tea, Maxwell reading property listings, Ethan hunched over his bowl of cereal, and Olivia, who glanced up with a satisfied smirk that confirmed she'd been fully briefed on the previous evening's ultimatum. "So," she purred with honeyed malice as I poured myself coffee, "when do you plan to start paying your rent, or will you be seeking alternative accommodation?" Something deep within me, perhaps my father's unwavering integrity, finally broke free. I placed my mug deliberately on the counter and returned her smile with professional coolness. "Actually, I've reached a definitive conclusion." Every head turned in my direction. "This house legally belongs to me," I stated, my voice remarkably steady despite the anger coursing through my veins. "It was bequeathed to me specifically by my father. Everyone currently residing here does so solely because I have permitted it." Maxwell attempted to interject, but I raised my hand with the authoritative gesture I typically reserved for difficult clients. "Beginning next month, I'll be implementing a formal rental agreement. Each of you, Maxwell, Olivia, and Ethan, will be responsible for $500 monthly rent. That totals $2,000 for the household." A stunned silence descended upon the kitchen. Olivia's jaw literally dropped in shock. "You can't possibly be serious," Mom finally whispered, her face draining of color. "I am entirely serious. I've conducted a proper market analysis. Consider this the current fair market value for the property, divided equitably among 4 adults. It's actually quite favorable compared to comparable rentals in the area. You absolutely cannot charge us rent." Olivia shrieked, her voice climbing several octaves. "This is completely deranged." I calmly sipped my coffee, feeling strangely centered amid their collective outrage. "If these terms aren't acceptable, you're certainly welcome to secure alternative housing. As a real estate professional, I can confirm there are numerous rental options available throughout Pinewood." "You would evict your own mother from her home?" Maxwell demanded, rising to his full height to loom over me intimidatingly. I met his gaze unflinchingly. "No. I would charge my mother and her family appropriate rent for occupying a property they do not own. After everything we've sacrificed for you," Mom protested, her voice quavering with emotion. "We've diligently maintained this house, covered all expenses." While enjoying rent-free occupancy for 8 years, I interjected decisively. "And now you're attempting to charge me rent for my own property. How does that fundamentally differ from my proposal?" I collected my portfolio case and moved toward the door. "Consider your options carefully. I'll expect your decision soon." The drive to work passed in a haze. Part of me was astonished by my own boldness, but a stronger, more resolute part recognized that this confrontation was long overdue. They had pushed beyond reasonable boundaries, and something had to fundamentally change. That evening I collected takeout on my drive home and consumed it in the privacy of my bedroom. No one acknowledged my presence. The pattern repeated the following day, and the day after that. I had become essentially invisible in my own home, deliberately ignored by everyone, including my own mother. 2 excruciating weeks of frigid silence stretched endlessly. I purchased separate groceries and maintained them in a designated section of the refrigerator. I scheduled my laundry during hours when the house stood empty. Though I ached for reconciliation with my mother, I refused to capitulate. Not on this fundamental principle. Finally, on a rain-soaked Sunday afternoon, Mom and Maxwell intercepted me in the living room as I reviewed property assessments. "We've reached a decision," Maxwell announced with rigid formality. "We're relocating. We've secured a townhouse on the eastern side of Pinewood." I nodded slowly, experiencing a complex wave of emotions, profound relief that the unbearable tension would finally dissipate, genuine sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to this point, and lingering resentment that they, particularly my own mother, had forced this impossible situation. "When is your move date?" I inquired. "Next weekend," Mom replied softly, still avoiding direct eye contact. "The lease has already been executed. I'll be removing everything I personally financed," Maxwell added with undisguised hostility. "The washer/dryer unit, the dishwasher, the entertainment system in the living room." "That's perfectly acceptable," I responded evenly. "Please take whatever items you purchased." The following week resonated with the symphony of packing, boxes being sealed, furniture being disassembled, closets being emptied. Olivia made a theatrical production of slamming doors and drawers whenever I entered her vicinity. Ethan maintained his characteristic isolation. Mom barely acknowledged my existence, channeling her energy into methodical organization and packing. The pain cut deeper than I cared to admit, watching her choose Maxwell and his children over me with such crushing finality. Friday evening, Maxwell arrived with a rented moving truck. I deliberately kept my distance as they loaded furniture pieces and labeled boxes. I noticed with a pang that several items they were claiming had unquestionably been my father's purchases: the hand-carved dining table he'd commissioned from a local craftsman, several kitchen appliances he'd selected with typical architectural precision. But the emotional toll of these weeks had left me too drained to initiate yet another confrontation. As they neared completion, movement in the foyer caught my attention. Maxwell and Ethan were attempting to maneuver my father's prized grandfather clock, a magnificent timepiece that had occupied the same spot by the staircase since before my earliest memories. That remains here, I stated with unwavering conviction, stepping into the hallway. Maxwell's expression darkened. I invested over $800 having it professionally serviced 3 years ago. It wasn't even functional when your father passed. The clock belonged to my father, I countered, my voice steady but resolute. He selected it personally from Harrington's Antiques the year I was born. It stays with the house. For a tense moment, his eyes flashed with defiance, but Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm and subtly shook her head. With visible reluctance, they abandoned the clock and moved toward the door. As they prepared for their final trip to the truck, Mom lingered behind in the kitchen while the others loaded the remaining boxes. I never imagined our relationship would disintegrate like this, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Neither did I replied, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. But your actions left me without alternatives. Mom averted her gaze. I expected you to be more understanding of our situation. Understanding? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Was it understanding to allow Olivia to treat me like an unwelcome intruder? Was it understanding to demand I vacate my own home for her birthday celebration? Was it understanding to consistently prioritize your husband's wishes over your daughter's legitimate rights? Maxwell has provided stability and security for me, Nora. He stepped in when I was drowning after your father died. He moved into my inherited home and conducted himself as though he possessed ownership rights. And you enabled that behavior at every turn. Mom exhaled a weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of our fractured relationship. I see we've reached an impasse on this matter. I should join the others now. They're waiting for me. Goodbye, Nora. And with that simple farewell, they departed. The house, which had felt suffocatingly hostile for months, suddenly echoed with a profound emptiness that was both liberating and strangely disorienting. That first night of solitude, I wandered through each room like a curious explorer, mentally cataloging what remained and what needed replacement. The living area stood barren without its sofa and entertainment system. The kitchen counters looked strangely empty without the microwave and coffee station. 3 bedrooms now echoed with emptiness, stripped of beds, dressers, and personal touches. Yet instead of the melancholy or isolation I had expected, an unexpected sense of tranquility washed over me. This house was truly mine now, in a way it hadn't been since my father's passing. The freedom to reimagine each space, to fill it with my own carefully selected pieces, to transform it back into a genuine home after years of emotional exile, the possibilities made my heart swell. The following morning I drove to the nearest design center and thoughtfully selected a tailored sectional sofa, a professional-grade coffee system, and essential kitchen implements. I ordered custom furniture online and arranged delivery of a premium mattress. Throughout the weekend, I methodically cleaned every surface, throwing open windows to allow fresh spring air to circulate freely through rooms that had felt stifling for too long. Monday morning, I returned to the office with noticeably lighter spirits. My colleagues immediately detected the change in my demeanor. "Something's different about you," my director observed during our morning briefing. "You seem more centered, more present." I smiled with genuine warmth. I am. My home situation has finally resolved itself. Audrey visited that evening to see my reimagined space. She gave a low whistle as she toured the half-furnished rooms. They certainly didn't leave much behind, did they? No. But that gives me the perfect opportunity to start fresh. To reclaim the space as my own. She helped me position my new furniture pieces and hung framed photographs I'd carefully selected, images of Dad teaching me to read blueprints, of my graduation ceremony, of meaningful moments with friends who had supported me through difficult transitions. "Any regrets?" she asked as we relaxed on my new sofa, sipping wine from ceramic mugs because proper glassware remained on my acquisition list. "About holding your ground?" I considered the question thoughtfully. No. I miss the mother I once had, and I wish circumstances had evolved differently, but I have no regrets about asserting my rightful place in my own home. My birthday arrived in early October with the brilliant foliage that had always made my father exclaim with delight. I harbored no expectations of hearing from Mom, yet her silence still pierced my heart. Aunt Catherine called with birthday wishes and mentioned, with obvious discomfort, that she'd encountered Mom and Maxwell at the farmer's market, commenting that they appeared to be adjusting well to their new living situation. She didn't inquire about me at all, did she? I asked quietly. Aunt Catherine's telling pause provided all the confirmation I needed. Give her space to process, Nora. She's always been obstinate. A trait you both share. I maintain no contact with my mother or her family now. They withheld their new address, and I've never requested it. The fact that Mom didn't even acknowledge my birthday spoke volumes about her priorities. Maxwell and his children claim her allegiance, not her own daughter. Occasional updates from extended family indicate they're managing well, and that knowledge suffices. I live independently in my father's masterpiece now, but loneliness remains a stranger. For the first time since his passing, I experience genuine peace within these walls. This house is my sanctuary, my inheritance, my rightful place in the world. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I know with absolute certainty that I made the correct decision in defending what was mine. Dad, with his unwavering integrity and quiet strength, would have nodded with unmistakable pride.